Communication, by its nature, has sender and a receiver. From the start, we have already talked about a communication must have a sender and a receiver. Communication occurs between two or more people acting as the speaker or the receiver of the message. In other words, it is a two-way process of reaching mutual understanding, in which participants do not only exchange information, news, ideas, and feelings, but also create and share meaning. Communication must have a sender and receiver because this is the only way people can connect with one another. And aside from knowing that there is a sender and a receiver in a communication, we also have to distinguish what kind of communication is occurring on a situation. So say for example, a communication is either verbal or non-verbal. Communication can be expressed through written or spoken words or actions. There is a misconception when we talk about communication because we always think that communication is verbal. However, we have just known that communication can either be verbal or non-verbal. There are words that must be sufficed by our actions, and there are actions that must be sufficed by our words, meaning they collaborate with one another. When we talk to a person face to face, we couldn't help ourselves but to express our words with our actions. Which one is essential, verbal or non-verbal? Well, of course, as what we have just discussed, verbal communication can be sufficed by our non-verbal communication, and non-verbal communication can be sufficed by our verbal communication. That means they collaborate with one another, and that also means that they are essential. Both are essential in our communication. A good communication combines verbal and non-verbal. There must be a balance between verbal and non-verbal. You cannot just overemphasize non-verbal, and you cannot also overemphasize verbal without supplementing it with non-verbal communication. Communication is inevitable. You cannot get rid of communication. Even if you are not talking with one another, that's communication. This notion tells us that communication is everywhere. When there is silence in a seminar, when there is someone who yawns in a webinar, that means something. The truth is, we are communicating constantly. Even when you do not want to communicate, you are communicating. That's the irony of communication. When you don't want to communicate, that is communication. Communication is irreversible. This means that what you have said can never be unsaid. Irreversibility happens the very minute you click the OK button for a comment or post on your social media, and that it would be too late to take it back when a lot of people have already reacted and commented to it. The same thing happens when you utter offensive words to someone. That drives your anger, that drives your emotion, and you have uttered unprecedented words to your classmate or to your friend. Unfortunately, you can no longer take it back. You can no longer reverse what you have just said. And sometimes it's really late to be sorry. Even if you would say sorry to the person whom you have hurt, the damage has already been done, and there might be changes on your relationship. The person may forgive you, but the effect of what you have said is lasting. So we can take a lesson from this, that we have to think first before we utter our words. We have to be mindful of anything that comes out from our mouth, and also on the things that we post on our social media. You have to remember that even if communication builds relationship, it can also destroy relationships. So it depends upon how you manage relationship through communication. Communication is unrepeatable. Unrepeatability means that an act of communication can never be duplicated. When an utterance or a sentence have been said for how many times, for many times, then the effect is different. The effect could not be the same